Okay, I'd like to call the Charter and Rules Committee to order. I'm Ward 2 Councilor Terry Murphy. To my right is Council President and Ward 7 Councilor Todd McGee. To my left is Councilor Linda Bacon. Also with us is Councilor at Large McGiverin, with Tallman and Sullivan. And we also have Mr. Jack McCarthy, the Executive Director of the MSBA, that has agreed to come and speak to us and answer some questions. So I would entertain a motion that we take up item 1, 2, and 3 as a package for discussion purposes only.
The motion would be to suspend the rules, take them up as a package for discussion purposes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So just, and I'm going to, I think most people know what item 1, 2, and 3 are. I'm going to summarize it to the best of my ability so people at home will know. Item 1 was introduced by Councilor McGiverin on December 18th. It was basically looking to have a ballot question, a debt exclusion ballot question for the 2 schools to be placed on the ballot April 30th. Obviously, that has not happened. Second order is also from Councilor McGiverin dated May 7th, and that's calling for the debt exclusion ballot question, again for the 2 schools, one at Chestnut Street, one at the Peck site, and calling for a special election date on September 24th, 2019. And the third order is one that I introduced on 5/21, asking for consideration of just 1 school to be at the Chestnut Street site. And again, looking to seek a debt exclusion on that particular thing. So with those concepts in mind, I would like to invite Executive Director McCarthy to offer a few comments and then to answer questions.
Thank you, Councilor. Thank you for allowing me to be here. I hope to alleviate some confusion. I've been following this issue in your press, your local press, and hopefully there'll be no confusion when I'm done. Let me tell you a couple things about the MSBA just for context. We were created in 2004. It was in response to an audit by then State Auditor Joe Danucci, who basically found that the then program was irretrievably broken. And one of the problems was they called it the Wild Wild West, and that not meaning Western Massachusetts, just the Wild Wild West. And things would happen. They had the field of dreams that if you build it, they will come mentality. So they built oversized schools. They put things in schools that were not close to being educationally appropriate. And so the legislature created the current Massachusetts School Building Authority in 2004. And they basically gave us 2 jobs. The first job was to clean up the mess. So we inherited $10.1 billion of liabilities, almost evenly split between projects that were already completed and the state was on the hook for their share, and projects that were approved and either in construction or hadn't started construction, but were approved, and we had to support the state share of those projects as well. I'm happy to state that as of now, from that $10.1 billion, we're down to less than $300 million. So I think we've almost accomplished, and the only reason we haven't finished is their annual payments to districts to pay off the bonds that are still outstanding. We offer folks, early retirement of that, but most of them don't take it. The ones that are left, all the refinancing has really gone out of it. So we should be all done in 2024 with that $300 million. But every year that amount of money that we have to put out is smaller. And then the second job was to create a new system that was way more disciplined than the original system, was very much responsive to the taxpayers of Massachusetts, and that had bright lines and clear rules that were followed. And that's the process that we follow now, and that's the process to which the City of Holyoke is currently invited. A little historic outline of this project. In 2013, Holyoke was invited in for a project at the McMahon School. And that's the statement of interest that's really still operating, even though we're not talking about the McMahon anymore. And it seemed to languish from 2013, 2014, 2015. And then when Dr. Zreich came in, he approached us and said, what am I supposed to do with this statement of interest? So we agreed at the MSBA. The board voted, and a lot of it had to do with the situation that Holyoke found itself. They were in receivership, and we thought it would be a helpful thing if we would help and fund 80% of I'll call it a master plan, but it was a study to look at all the buildings throughout the city and help Dr. Zreich and his educators figure out what's the most educationally appropriate and cost-effective solution for the city of Holyoke. And that's where we find ourselves today, in that, what the city did, they took that master plan, did a feasibility study, and came up with the proposal that, the two-school middle school solution was the best one for the city of Holyoke. MSBA staff studied that recommendation. We then made a recommendation to our board of directors and agreed with the proposal that came from the city of Holyoke, that the two-school solution was in fact the best solution educationally and cost-effective wise. So our board voted to make that the project. So what does that mean? Basically, it means that you find yourselves in a position where the MSBA has made an offer to the city of Holyoke that we will support a two-school solution to the tune of, don't hold me to the dollars, to the little, it's more than 75 million, less than 77, I don't know the exact numbers, and, that is subject to change because we don't have the final documents into us. They're due to us July 10th for an August board, which means that, time is of the essence for you folks to act on this so that the consultants can then have the time to, fine-tune the submittals so that they can get us to us on July 10th so that we can have it for an August board. I want to make it just totally clear, the only solution that the MSBA is willing to support is the two-school solution. I know that question 3, I believe, has a question that's just a one-school solution. That's not what the MSBA board approved, and it's not something that we are willing to entertain. I've been in this position before where I have to go to tell a district, look, here's our offer. Here's your options. You can accept our offer, or you can reject our offer. You can't amend our offer. The time for looking at other options has passed. That's what the feasibility study is for. That's why you folks spent, I know it was more than 800,000. Did it go over $1 million? I can't remember. But that's what you spent that money on, was to come up with to study the options and come up with a recommendation to the MSBA. And so, I can't make it any more clear. The two-school solution is the only solution that the MSBA will entertain. If you deviate from that or reject it, then the city of Holyoke will be removed from our pipeline, and you'll have to file statements of interest all over again and start from square one. And I can give you several examples of communities that have done that. My least favorite one, but probably tells the story best, is the town of Lincoln, who rejected a vote for a project back in, I think it was it had to be 2012. It was either 2012 or 2013, and then filed statements of interest every year since, and they never rose up to being the most urgent and needy, and now they find themselves right now doing that project on their own with no support and no funds from the MSBA. So I put that out there as not that definitely going to happen to you, but it could happen to you if you decide not to do it. Again, I hate when projects fail. I really do. And because we spend a lot of time trying to come up with the best solution, but between the two of us, we spent a lot of money coming up with this solution. Not only the feasibility study, but the master plan that we funded, which is, I've been the executive director since January of 2012. This is the only master plan we've ever funded for a district. And we funded 80% of that. So that's where we find ourselves. I hope it's very clear. There's only one solution that we are making the offer to. And I'll stop now and handle questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me start. What would be the final deadline for the city to decide on putting it on the ballot? And the second question is, does the city council have to approve the bonding prior to the debt exclusion question being on the ballot? Do you know that answer?
I'm not sure I understand. Are you?
So we've got a proposal in Finance Committee for a $131 million bond. And I believe I've been informed that that should take place before a debt exclusion would have an impact. I was originally under the impression that the debt exclusion would go, and if it passed, then the city council would be considering the bond at that point. And
Yeah, that's outside my bailiwick.
okay, so the deadline.
So I want to say, so going back to July 10th is when we would want a submittal to us for your final costs so that we could look at the August board meeting. So I would say we're right up against it because the consultants have some work to do. They're doing their job. They're trying to do value engineering and figure out if they change things, is there ways that they can make more of the costs eligible? Because as you may have heard many times, your reimbursement rate is 80%, but it's 80% of eligible costs. Not every cost is eligible. And I know that the OPM and your designer are going through with sharpening the pencils to see if they can figure out ways to make more costs eligible for reimbursement.
So July.
Your next meeting's due,
July 10th for them to get their final paperwork costs together and then submit to you for an August meeting?
Yes.
In August?
It's middle of August, 28th, it's the end of August.
And just so, and I think I've got the answer, and I think I heard you tell me this morning, that a November ballot question would work fine.
Yeah, so if your feasibility study technically expires in late October, but if we know you have a question on the ballot for November, we would grant you I think I can go up to 60 days extension.
Okay.
The opposite of that is if there is no question on the ballot, then we would allow that to lapse. The feasibility study. If there's no question by then it's as if you had a failed vote and you're out of the pipeline.
Okay. I spent a lot of time, you talk about early retirement. I wonder why the heck I didn't just stay in retirement. But we'll try to have a smile while I say that. But so let me because I want to make sure, and when I heard you say what you said to me this morning, I think you probably recognized my voice was somewhat, I think that was our morning call, right?
It was a morning, yeah.
Okay. So this is what I read, and this is how I came to the conclusion that an option was available. So this is a paragraph that came from MSBA. Proceeding with and securing local authorization of an option other than that previously approved by the MSA board requires review and action by the MSBA board of directors in order for the district to continue to qualify for reimbursement of otherwise eligible cost. Now, I read that paragraph about 10, 15 times, thinking, an option other than previously approved. To me, that is an amendment. Now, is it that the MSBA is saying there's no way we're going to do it in this case, or that they never do it?
Yeah, as I said, I've been the executive director since 2012, and I can't think of an instance where we have. We have had people make minor alterations, you know, like they found out that they had to move the gym from this side of the building to the other. And I think that language is supposed to cover things like that, because technically that wouldn't be the project as approved, because it's a change. But a change from a two-building, 550 student school to a one-building, that's not a minor change. So that language would not be meant to cover that.
I would advise then that
Yeah, it's-
someone edit that language, 'cause I clearly interpreted that, and I had several other people read it
Sure,
also
and-
interpreting it that same way, so.
Yeah, you know, it's one of those things where we know what we meant, but now,
I hear you.
now I know what others, so we can certainly work on that language.
So one other question I want to ask before I turn it over to the committee, and eventually I'll have comments at the end, I'm sure, but I know Senator Humison has passed amendment that it has passed the Senate Finance Committee. It's in conference committee, I believe, with the House. It looks like it's going to be favorable. The original communications I had made me think that it was going to have a substantial potential impact, but now that I'm getting statistical analysis, it looks like the impact of that is 3.5%, which would be about $4 million. I'm not frowning on $4 million.
Sure.
But it certainly does not take us from 58 to 70, 75. Is that your view as well?
Yeah, it would be about, I think it's 3.5 is a good number to go at, 3.5%. But I think I caution you on counting your chickens before they're hatched. I've seen, you know, it did not pass in the House, and it was raised in the House. The fact that it didn't pass, I didn't ask anybody, but the fact that it didn't, you know, it wasn't part of the House budget says something. It did pass in the Senate, as you suggest. Now it's in conference committee. Conference committee is a interesting thing to watch, because there's a lot of horse trading that goes on, and you know, a lot of things get traded in and out. So I do like to, no, I don't like to bet on what's going to come out of a conference committee. So I'm not saying it's not going to come out, but I wouldn't be betting the farm on it. And you also have
The governor.
the governor's potential veto. I have no idea where he would be on that.
And I've gotten mixed views on that, so, I mean, it could be, it may not be, but, and we aren't counting the chickens, believe me, so. Committee members want to, Councilor Bacon?
Thank you for coming in. We appreciate you taking the time and the travel to meet with
Well,
us.
these projects are important to me, and, you know, your kids are just as important to me as the kids in Norwood. That's where I live.
And we understand that, and we appreciate that, and all the work that has gone into it. And I am aware of the different analysis relative to cost effectiveness. Our biggest sticking point locally, as I'm sure you're well aware, is we're not arguing with the studies or the recommendations that came out of them. The big challenge that we have locally is affordability, period, citywide. The reason we have to look at the ballot to do the debt exclusion vote, to consider it at council, is because we have no other way of funding the project, period, within the city or any other part of it. And so our fiduciary responsibility is to look at not just the cost effectiveness of the proposal relative to the school system itself, but the affordability and the financial viability for the city as a whole going forward. To that end, a number of us are trying to get our arms around the full debt picture of the city separate from this, and have great concern about going to a ballot with the question because of those remaining bigger picture outstanding questions. So I'm accepting your argument around cost effectiveness from the perspective of the school. But we're looking at it in the context of the feedback we're getting from the people who would have to bear
Sure.
that result, should it
And-
go on the ballot and pass.
And that's one of the things I like the most about debt exclusion overrides. The people get to decide if they want to raise their own taxes, you know?
Is that supposed to be anything in this chamber?
Please,
I did not mean for that to
yeah,
end in
and
that.
please, this is not a cheering gallery, with all due respect. Let's keep it where we're not cheering, booing, or whatever. We just respect the person's comments. And if you are happy with someone's comments, be happy internally. If you're disappointed with someone's comments, be disappointed internally. But let's not have this become a cheering session. I've experienced enough of those in my life from other events, so.
And I take your point that you're making, but I would also make the point that there's a reason why this requires a 2/3 vote of the city council. And it's because it's our responsibility to look at the impact on the city as a whole, the fiscal condition of the city, which we've been doing our best to do our due diligence in that regard. And then if, as a council, we are voting to put this on the ballot, we are sending a message that this is a viable program and option for the city going forward to incur this 30-year obligation that we would put before the citizens. So, thank you.
Councilor McGiverin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ms. McCarthy, welcome to Holyoke, and I think we all appreciate your presence this evening and so far the explanations of the MSBA and what we're facing. I'd like to talk about a few things you said and talk about what our perspective is, and to me it's more than just affordability, but affordability is always important to any community. Children are important to any community. Norwood, Mass., your children are important to you. Their education is a big part of the upbringing of children in any community. Norwood, Mass., your median income is $87,000. Holyoke, Massachusetts, median income is $37,000. Being a very quick historical perspective, the first planned industrial community in the country, this city was built based on manufacturing, based on jobs that were within walking distance of this building. That industry fell apart in the 50s, 60s when it moved south. And when it moved south, there was tenement buildings that were very much occupied by working families that became vacant. Holyoke didn't create poverty. We service poverty. Poverty came to us, and I think we do a pretty good job of understanding and recognizing what poverty is. But that 37 medium income, the taxpayers of Holyoke cannot or should not pay for poverty by themselves. People who live in bedroom communities need to recognize that the state dollars need to come to Holyoke with a different formula. Chapter 70 used to recognize that. There are changes being made to Chapter 70 right now, which the last time this happened, lawsuits went right up to the Supreme Court. The MSBA, I don't think it's their fault. I think it's the state legislature's not recognizing what is happening to Holyoke on this project. You know, they tell us we're a gateway community and they want to work with us and they want to do all the right things, and we automatically qualify for 80%. And I understand that's not of the total cost of the project. There are soft costs that have never qualified for reimbursement under any formula. But, Jack, they also tell us that there's a construction formula cap, that regardless of whether something qualifies or not, when you reach that cap, even if you continue to outdesign, outbuild the project itself, the cap stops you from getting reimbursed. Is that correct?
Yes, there's a per square foot construction cost cap that everyone who's involved in our projects has to abide by.
Okay. So the projects and the two middle school concept in the projects, I understand. And I think you called it a master plan, and Dr. Zreich has explained it to us in detail for people who want to listen, is important because this is more about realigning our elementary schools, consolidating our elementary children into 4 or 5 of our better schools. and doing something that is in dire need of change. It also would be a savings in operational costs of $3 to $4 million per year, which is part of the master plan, which makes sense. And the two schools, I think, make sense because we originally looked at one school, the population would be about 1,100, which would be very difficult at the type of 7th and 8th grader within the city limits itself in one building. So it makes sense. But again, getting back to that reimbursement and getting back to our issue of affordability, is the project that has been presented, the feasibility study and the project that has been presented to the MSBA over the construction cap, because the City of Holyoke's project is asking to build too much.
I don't believe that's the case. I think, well, every new construction is over the cap right now. And that's how it was set up originally. Back in 2008, I think, is when the first projects began. Our cap for construction was 275. And at that time, our estimates were coming in at 350 and above. The great thing that happened, let me strike great from the record on that one. The thing that happened then was we had the recession. And so that was the best time in probably the last 40 years to build something. And so construction costs were actually less than the 275. When the 275 was set, the MSBA never envisioned that it would cover the whole construction cost because we had the estimates at 350 and above. But, during the recession, we were getting 260, 270, and so people got in the habit of, MSBA is covering the entire, square foot construction cost. And it was the luck of the draw for those folks that were bidding at that time. So we do have a cap. We've increased it 4 times up to the 333. What you may or may not know is in our statute, we have a cap of what we can spend every year. And that cap can rise or fall depending on how the sales tax performs. So if the sales tax performs well, our cap rises. But again, even that rise is capped further. It can't go more than 4.5%. So what the MSBA has tried to do is to try to keep as much as possible the same number of communities that we help. And so when our sales tax rose, we would raise our construction cost cap at the same percentage as the sales tax rose so that we could give more to the communities but not do less projects. So we've been trying to keep our construction cap in line with how the sales tax performs. I don't know if it was...
It helps, but if I could just expand it just a little bit, I want to make sure I'm reading it correctly. You didn't answer directly, but we're not looking at building a Taj Mahal.
No.
Okay, we're putting something reasonable that follows the master plan, what we just outlined.
Yeah, your square foot cost is around
Okay,
$450.
so no matter what we did in construction, we're still going to reach a cap at
I
whatever.
would suggest that's the most likely scenario.
Okay. Now, so the second part became, we'd love just 80%. We don't want the 100%. We understand that, all right? Just give us the 80%. And again...
Well, I am.
And again,
We just have a different definition of it.
Again, well, the construction cap, kills us. I'm looking at this as the state legislature problem, not the MSBA. Sure. But I understand you're here and we're going to keep on drilling you, and hopefully the message will keep getting back to Boston, and then someday soon someone will wake up. The other part is, and we've been told this, so I want to make sure I understand it and it's correct, is there are incentives out there after you hit a cap where you can bring yourselves above the cap. And I know you're talking to Councilor Murphy about that a little bit. But I was told that there's 5 incentives and we cannot qualify for them because we are a gateway community that is at 80%.
Yeah. So my statute specifically says with incentive points, nobody can go over the 80%.
All right, but we're not at 80%. Why can't we use the incentive points?
But as I said before, you are at 80%. It just,
Well, we're
and I
being
have,
told we're at 59%.
you and I have it, because you're at 80% of eligible costs, and that's the key. You know, all the caps fall into eligible costs. One thing I just want to correct you on, soft costs are eligible up to a cap as well. So not all the soft costs are eligible, but I don't want to say because I'll get it wrong, but I think it's 10% for the designer, and Margaret, is it 4 or 3.5 for OPM? The cap for OPMs? It's 3. 3.5, okay. So that's in there as well.
Okay. So we're going to agree to disagree a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, you can disagree with how I define it, but that's how I define it, so, and, you know, that's been the way it's been since day one. And, you know, part of all of that is as you may or may not know, you know, our reimbursement rates go from 31% to 80%, and it's on a sliding scale, and in our statute is a formula. I have zero discretion about what your base reimbursement rate is, because it's based on information I get from Department of Revenue and the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. They both give us numbers on the communities. We plug them into the formula that's found in our statute, and that's how the base rate is formed. So there's zero discretion. You're correct, and the legislature did limit 80% as to not being able to receive incentive points that would bring them over the 80% of eligible cost. You're correct in saying that.
Okay. But you're going to stop short of saying I'm correct that we're not getting 80%.
Correct, because if you just stop using the words, I mean, if you included the words eligible cost, then you'd be right that you are getting 80%.
Okay. But if we get back to the construction formula, I think that's where I'm really going.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with the construction cap. You know, and what would the purpose of a construction cap be, other than the history of the MSBA having to take care of that $300 million, you know, since the creation of the MSBA to take control and to keep costs down.
Well, it is to keep costs down.
Yeah.
But it has very little to do with the inherited debt. I mean, we're trying to raise our cap. We've filed legislation to raise our cap.
What I'm saying is that was the second charge of the MSBA after it was created, was to create a program, a formula that works.
Right.
And to me, I'm reading that's keep the costs down.
Yeah, it is. And
Okay.
so let me, you asked me the question, so just let me complete my answer. One of the major reasons for the cap is so that people will say, well, I don't want to spend over that cap. How can I build a good building and try to keep it as close to that cap as possible? It's to try to get people, as you suggest, but it's not just to save money from me. It's so that the districts themselves will try to tighten the belt and try to live as close to the cap as they can. And, you know, there are things beyond everybody's control, like the current construction climate. I've never seen such a boom in my lifetime of construction going on in the Commonwealth. And we're probably, if not the highest, among the top 5 states in the country of construction work that's going on right now. So, you know, it ebbs and flows. I'm not praying for a recession, but hopefully the construction activity will slow down and we'll be able to bring our costs down. Actually, some of the bids that have come in the past 6 months have been lower than the estimates that we had out there. So it's not getting back to the days of 2008, 2009, 2010, but it seems to be gradually, you know, coming back to earth in a way.
Okay. I appreciate your candor and your answers. I just want to note the seat next to you on your left is my seat, assigned seat for the meetings. That's usually the
You don't
hot
have any
seat.
food or anything in there.
It might be some candy, but you know, but that's usually the hot seat. I think you're sitting in the hot seat this evening. But thank you for coming down.
My pleasure.
Okay, I just want to recognize Councilor Lisi and Councilor Leahy, who have come in after I made the initial announcement.
Do they have notes for being tardy?
They get a bonus for being tardy. Any other councilors with comments, Council Sullivan?
Yeah, so, thanks, Jack. If we vote yes in November, and after that, you raise the square foot construction cap, are we locked out, or?
Yeah, the construction cap is what it is when we sign the project funding agreement. When they'll actually strike that, when the board votes for the project funding agreement, which could happen in August.
All right, and so if there's a increase in the cap in November or December, we won't get to see any of that,
That's correct. I don't anticipate that happening.
or any time subsequent to the
Well,
start.
I mean, within like, I can't tell you what's going to happen next year.
Right.
Councilor McGee?
Yeah, first, thank you for coming down. We do appreciate it, and you're not in the hot seat, from my view. It's for informational purposes, simply because we're trying to get as much information out to the community. That's what we've been asked to do, while at the same time, ultimately get the ballot question out there with as much information. So we thank you for coming here. And my issue has always been not so much against the formula per se, because I understand you can't open up a new formula and then you guys would be back to square one with your debt problem. Mine's always been, if you look at the history for us, not so much Joe's history, but mine of, we were put into receivership, which is a Commonwealth problem. It's not the City of Holyoke's problem. It's now the Commonwealth. They took us over. We then went to you and asked you for a feasibility study, which we do appreciate the 80% reimbursement on that, of which, based on your feasibility study, we now see that our schools are in one of the worst shapes possible. All buildings. Which then the recommendation was 2 buildings because you need 2 buildings. I mean, you just said it, it's on the record. So we appreciate that. Now the problem is the funding part. And we do appreciate the amount that is coming in, 58, 59, it's all over the board. My issue is, what can we do to help soften that blow of $56 million, not only to the business, but residents who are on fixed incomes and everything else? I spent a long time discussing with Senator Humison his bill that did go through as an amendment to the budget. And I understand yours, everything is subject to change. Of which it says, notwithstanding Section 10 of Chapter 70B of the general laws, and for the purpose of this program, the authority may allow one participating school district to receive all allowable incentive percentage points in determining a project's grant percentage. May. So let's assume, and for those who don't understand the process in Boston, the amendment went through on the Senate side, goes to conference committee. Let's assume, everything's subject to change, but let's go with good facts for once for Holyoke. It's approved through the conference. Then it goes to the governor. The governor, you're right, has the right to veto it. Let's assume he doesn't. Let's assume he understands that Holyoke's in need. And it's approved. Now, when people were calling the treasurer's office, they were asking for help, and the treasurer pushed back, and I got the email saying, we can't do anything unless the legislature allows us. We'll go back to it. The authority may allow, which then is, it's not shall.
Correct.
So if everything is approved, the may falls back on you guys, you and the treasurer, to say, we can offer those incentives.
So technically, so I don't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Technically, the board would have to approve it.
Right, so of which some numbers have been thrown around, and you threw something out that it was interesting. We heard 4.3%, now you're at 3.5%. What is the max that we could get on incentive points?
What I said, 4.5, probably 5. I went with most people on the maintenance points get 1.5. Very rarely do they get 2, so that's why I brought it down to the half.
But what my question is, what is the max? So if
Would be
I-
5 then.
5. So 5 is the total number you could possibly get.
As I sit here now, I can't think of any other ones that you'd qualify for. You wouldn't qualify for a regional school district, you're not doing an ad reno. It's not a model school. The model school doesn't have incentive points anymore, so, I think that's it, but.
Yeah, I'm not gonna,
No, I know, but
all
I just-
numbers are, I mean, we
Yeah,
throw numbers around all the time to
I'm,
get to-
I'm probably within 1%, give or take.
So let's assume 5%, subject to change. So if it was 5% that could happen, and the legislature gives you that right, I'm asking you, can we have the 5%?
Like I said,
I know it goes back to the board,
I-
but based on our situation,
if the board approves it, well, let me say this. I don't know, and you probably know, I don't, whether you meet all the preconditions. It was something about enrollment decreasing
Yep.
for over 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
Assume all of that stuff you meet. I don't know that you do or don't.
yeah, over the last 5 years, in 2012 to 13, we have it, it's actually on the amendment itself. It gives all the numbers to
Okay.
the enrollment to meet that criteria. Now, the real issue about this amendment that was approved by the senators, or all the senators, was that there was an understanding that they weren't talking about the incentive points. And this is why I want to get clear to the community. When I talked to Senator Humison, he was actually trying to get you to push you to give the full 80%. So that's where I'm going to ask for the record of what was debated. He was telling me I wanted to get you the full 80% reimbursement, whereas this is pretty clear to me that it's incentive percentages, which goes back to your 5%, which then is if we're at 59%, that gets us up to 64, which is not as bad as before. But if they were to amend that again to get to the 80%, how likely is that for the board to approve a district that is in receivership to get that one-time exception, which is what the legislation's trying to do for us?
Yeah, I don't want to, I'm not trying to be coy or dismissive, but if I told you what the board was going to be, they would shoot me the next day.
My whole premise is this. Look at everyone behind you. They've been here every meeting that we've had because it's that important. We need the schools, we know we do, but we need help. We are unique in the sense that we're in receivership. And that's why this legislation was approved, and hopefully it goes through on all sides. Which then goes to a number I've been trying to get a hold of, and it's a little suspect, is the school, and Anthony Soto's here from the school department, they've committed to give $1 million a year towards the cost. So their savings with the 2 new schools, plus busing and everything else, is projected to be about $1 million. What has that on the impact on the overall bond? For a 20-year bond, instead of being residential 1.31 and commercial 2.72, it roughly drops down to 1.10 for residential, 2.28 for commercial. That's just with the $1 million infusion. Once again, these are all projections, they're all over. Plus a 5%. That's the type of stuff that this city needs to make this project work for everybody. So my message to you is to thank you for everything, but at the same time to let you know that if this is approved, we are in need of that 5% if that is the magic number.
Yeah, like I said, I can't speak for the board, but you can look historically at what the board has done for Holyoke. As I said earlier, the only master plan, I call it, that's ever been approved by the board was for Holyoke, and the consideration. When I made the recommendation, I highlighted the fact that they were in receivership and needed our help.
No, once again, I appreciate your time.
I'm gonna recognize Councilor Leahy in 1 minute, but just so you know, I also got the same, not from Senator Humison, but from Senator Lewis, that the intent of the legislation was to get Holyoke up towards 80%. So
My understanding, just so you know, my understanding is the draft that came out was different than the draft that went in.
Okay.
So,
I read the draft that was approved, just to let everyone know.
Councilor Leahy?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I do apologize for being tardy this evening, driving in from Boston, and it's raining, and everybody was going extremely slow, even though I was going the speed limit. So I do want to say thank you for coming to Holyoke, sir. We appreciate it. I appreciate it. I do want to start off by saying, and since I was a little bit tardy, I'm not sure if you guys have taken it up or not, but I do think item 3 is wrong, and having 2 schools of 550 pupils combined into one, I'm dead set against that. So I'm urging you good counselors to give that leave to withdraw this evening if you haven't already. My daughter Paige, this morning, I was telling her about this meeting tonight. She reminded me of a quote that she must have just learned in school from Nelson Mandela. And she actually texted it to me today, and I just wrote it down. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can change the world. It's the most powerful weapon that you can change the world. That's Nelson Mandela. And I strongly believe that what we need to do in the city of Holyoke is just to do that. We need to give the tools to the children, the teachers, and the families. Last week, we spent about $500,000 on a lawsuit, according to for the schools. And that pained me to vote yes on spending $500,000 of our rainy day fund on a lawsuit. I would have much rather have spent $1 million, just like a day like this, it's literally raining out, on offsetting the cost for the taxpayers. That's something that I think we should do. I think it's a one-time fee or one-time hit. I'm sure our bond counsel wouldn't have, I'm not exactly sure what kind of opinion she would have. However, in my opinion, it would be a great thing. I also think there's been a lot of falsehoods, a lot of lies. I think social media has not helped this issue. I think it's only clouded this issue. I think that people are very emotional, and I get that, and it happens. And I think what they're doing is they're separating in 2 sides. You're either pro-raising my taxes, or you hate kids, or, I've heard it all. I've heard multiple lies from multiple people, and as best as I could, I called them out on it. What they're doing is muddling the waters. And what did we actually have to do here tonight? And I hope this comes out of committee tonight, because otherwise I think it won't be a very good thing if it doesn't. But I think that we have had these conversations, but what we as the 13 city councilors, our role is to put it on the ballot or not put it on the ballot. These are discussions that we're going to be having along the way. We, the councilors, and this is my opinion, should not silence the vote. We shouldn't be silencing any of these mouths back here. We should not be doing that.
I've asked you to please hold the applause, please.
I'm just one of many, but I'm certainly not going to silence the future of Holyoke. And I was just listening to a child over there making a little noise, and it reminded me of my son, Brendan, who's graduating Sunday from Holyoke High School. And boy, I wish he was that age again, because it's a chapter out of his life that I certainly, I love him, and I'm so happy that he's graduating, but I wish he was that age all over. And I don't think we could fail that child like the public schools did not fail my child, or they didn't fail me when I graduated K-12 from the Holyoke Public Schools. So I'm urging all the city councilors to vote on this and vote in favor of having it on the ballot. Thank you.
I just have one follow-up question. Just a procedural question. We had a neighborhood meeting, Ward 7, and I forgot to ask earlier, I do apologize. The date that came out in that meeting was June 6th. And I know I heard something a little different from you, so I guess I want clarification for the members of the council and the public. June 4th is our city council meeting.
And I think that's why I was basing on the June 6th on June 4th, knowing that that was when you would have the ability to vote on it.
So you need something by June 6th that allows Dory and Margaret to go do their thing to get it to you by
July 10th.
July 10th. So you need something by June 6th.
Well, they need it.
Well, I know, but yeah, I know they did. So just to be clear, June 6th is a deadline date.
Yeah, and I chose, yes, you're correct. And the reason I chose June 4th was because I knew that was the last meeting of the full board, I think, before June 6th. So that's why I went to the 4th.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Tullen?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. McCarthy, for coming down and giving us a better understanding of what's going on, with the MSBA and the rights that we have as a council. I think this is an important, very important issue for the community, and getting a lot of emails, a lot of calls about people about investment in our students, investment in our community, and I think that's what it's all about in the schools. I'll have to echo my several colleagues at stating that, it seems that's not fair that we're not getting that full 80%, and that everybody is trying to do that for us. And I just want to, give my opinion that, it's a big cost for our community, for business leaders, and for the residents that, we're struggling. We're a very poor community, and as our counselor stated, that we were in receivership, and I think the state, leaders and the legislatures and the governor should look at that and saying that we do need a little bit of extra help. With this study, and my concern is it's a 2-year thing. This has been going on for a while, and for you to come in and to give in essence, looking over the whole school system and how much we are in need, I think it's vital that we move this question out and give the voters a right to vote on this issue, whether they voted up or down. At least give them a chance to see what we need in our city and in our community. And and I am thankful for the MSBA for what they're trying to do to better communities across the state. So thank you very much.
Councilor Lisi?
So I just want to thank Mr. McCarthy for coming down. I know it's been a big trip for you, and it was really important for you to be here tonight because I think you really offered a lot of clarity to this body and to the community. And as a number of city councilors have noted, emotions have been running high on this issue. And I think a lot of people have been trying to, in their own way, come up with a solution that would work. But you really helped to give clarity and to, in some ways, frame the debate. The only thing that's on the table, from what I understand, is a 2-school solution that was approved by our local building commission. And we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to see $76 million of tax dollars that we are all contributing to the state from the City of Holyoke. And I don't think that, as we've heard here this evening, one of the poorest cities in the Commonwealth, we can turn our noses up at $76 million of state funding. So I am really filled with gratitude for the fact that you've been here this evening and made some of these areas that have been muddled along the way very clear. I do want to just say a few more things because I've been doing a lot of research on this issue. But debt exclusion funding is the way that many cities and towns go about funding the construction of a new school. In fact, our neighboring communities, East Hampton, in 2018, so just last year, from what I understand, East Hampton built one school and put a debt exclusion on one school at $109 million. The number that we're working with is $132 million for 2 schools. That is incredible if you think about how cost-effective 2 new schools in the City of Holyoke would be compared to 1 school in East Hampton. Ludlow bonded through debt exclusion for $60 million in 2018. Granby, again, these are smaller communities and some years ago now, $34 million in 2016. 1 small elementary school, not a middle school that has to have the equipment, the labs and the different sort of like learning spaces that we need for 21st century learning. If we want the City of Holyoke to have the same opportunities for education and career in the future, we need to make this investment today. I think we heard also that the timeline that we're looking at is this June 4th vote. We need to get the ballot question before the voters and have a set date so that the architects and the project manager and that team can come up with a concrete figure for us to work with in the bond language. So it really does make sense to move forward on the ballot language in advance of the bonding. And then finally, I know that there's a lot of folks in the audience here who are pro schools, but and there's also some folks that have been to the mic. And I know that they have said we're not against improving our educational facilities, but the tax rate has got to go. But it's really being interpreted, just so you know, all of the naysayers in the community are interpreting that message as it's an either-or situation. Either we get the new schools or the mall is going to go out of business. Either we're going to get new schools or we're all going to be driven out of town because of these high taxes. But again, like we heard, there's solutions out there. There's the potential for these incentives, the incentive points for additional funding. There's opportunities to collect some of the savings from the operations of the school budget and direct them towards the debt exclusion. There are opportunities to, we haven't even realized any of the host community dollars that are coming in around the 12 marijuana facilities that we've already permitted in the city. So there's lots of ways that we can offset the tax rate. And I hope that all of you that have been objecting to the tax rate will come to the table and work with us on figuring out how to mitigate the tax impact. Nobody, even I myself, I absolutely gawked at the idea that $240 would be the increase on my on a $200,000 average home in the city of Holyoke. But that is the worst case scenario, and there are so many people in this room that have been working on figuring out a solution. Those of you that are saying no new taxes, work with us on trying to figure, you have a lot of brain power, you have business acumen. Work with the city of Holyoke to figure out how we can redirect some of the revenue streams that are in the city to offset the tax impact. I want to yield and wrap it up there. I am extremely grateful for the amount of clarity that we've gained from this conversation this evening, and I'm very grateful for the amount of participation that we've had through both sides. But I hope that we understand this is a once in a generation opportunity that we can't forego. I think the MSBA has made us an offer that we can't refuse, and we should be really utilizing it and making the most of it for the children in this community. Thank you.
Terry, can I ask a follow-up question of mine?
Go ahead.
You're good. Councilor Lee.
Yeah, sir, you made an excellent point, and when Councilor McGee was asking some questions, one of the things that came to forefront was the different avenue streams. And we have a CPA now, which is the Community Preservation Act. Now, can we utilize that money for the outside, the park areas?
I don't know. Again, that's not my bailiwick. Actually, my town just started. We just approved the CPA, so we're still learning that as we go.
But it's possible to offset the cost?
If you can use that money, it's possible to.
So we'll look into
I don't
that.
know the rules of what you can use the CPA money for. That's why I'm hesitating.
My last comment is one of the things that when you guys were talking, you're talking about the different revenue streams and how if we had an increased enrollment, if that would help us. However, the reason we have a decreasing enrollment, one of the reasons, is because of the state allowing school choice. And we have millions of dollars that are getting taken out of the side of the city and going to other communities. Now, I'm not saying, that's a huge avenue, and it's also busing contracts. And so we have a lot of students that aren't attending our schools now, and they're taking the money with. So the reason I say that is because that's a decreasing, and so that too is hurting us. So we're losing the money, and yet we're not getting any more money because we lost the students. All right, thank you.
Councilor McGee.
Yeah, just for budget purposes, I gave a number earlier, and then we just got clarification, so thank you, Ms. Woods. I said earlier the 20-year bond would be about 1.31. Actually, no, I said 110 and 228.
Are you talking 20 or 30?
Well, I'm going to clarify that.
Okay.
So just for those on TV and watching here, when this all came about, a 30-year calculation was to the residential about an increase of about 1.31% on your taxes. which then, as Councilor Lisi had pointed out correctly, if it's $200,000 value home, about $200 and something a year. For commercial, it was about 2.73% increase. Well, with the school department, once again, adding in about the $1 million, the 30-year bond calculation would drop down from 131 to 110, so taking off about 0.21. For commercial, that would also come down from the 273 to 228, so roughly about 0.45. Are those staggering numbers? No. But I think what we have to understand is, with all of this, is that the max is the $56 million. So if we approve everything, we're on the hook for about $56 million. Once again, rough numbers. If we get the incentive through the school department, if the board approves the incentives, maybe 4.5%, maybe 5%, you know, whatever that number is, we're starting to dwindle that number down. As Councilor Leahy pointed out, it was brought up in the neighborhood meeting. One of the constituents said, could we use CPA money to apply to the outside, which then is, as our professional has always been there, Dory has always said, those are costs that aren't covered through the MSBA, so therefore, a smaller percentage, so therefore we can apply that maybe. So as we see, we're slowly picking away at the max. We know what the bad number is. The ultimate number might be a lot less. So for what voters have to understand is the scary number is there, but as we keep eating away at it, it's going to be a different number. We don't know what that number is. That's what we've been trying to drill at. That's why people are getting upset in the community, and I get that. But the ultimate number hasn't really been determined yet. We know the bad number. It can't go over that. We know what we can ultimately get to. So that has been the goal for right now. Therefore, I just wanted to give that update because I gave the wrong numbers earlier, but that is the new numbers with the infusion. Margaret Woods, I'd like to suspend the rules because she's been actually helping us with these numbers.
I just want to make sure those are dollar values, not percents.
Yeah, dollar values. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, I just want to make sure those numbers are on the record.
Any other counselors?
Yep.
Counselor Sullivan?
Jack, do you know we were just down in Norwood. We stayed there, and we have a basketball team here in Holyoke, an AAU team that played in Braintree, and the kids really all got to see some of the schools, the facilities, the middle schools are phenomenal down in that area of the state. When you talk about the construction, all we see, through Chelsea, Dedham, Norwood, Sharon, Walpole, there's cranes all over the place. I hope you noticed there weren't any here in Holyoke as you came in.
I did notice
Do you know
that.
do you know what your commercial tax rate is in Norwood?
I don't. I know it's higher than the residential, but I don't know off the top of my head.
I don't either, but I can tell you this. If we do this, Holyoke will have the highest tax rate, commercial tax rate in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That, when you couple it with the highest unemployment rate in Massachusetts, the lowest per capita income, how are we ever going to, it's going to be tough to draw jobs in. It's already tough to draw jobs into the city and new businesses in. So when you go back to your board, I hope you can convey this message to them, that we were up against something here in Holyoke that's unique, very unique from the rest of the state. And any kind of influence that you can have, and the board members with the governor, the treasurer, the Senate, the House, whatever you can do, we need it.
Counselor Bacon?
Thank you. I generally view the world as an optimist, but I'm also a realist. And we know that the future is best predicted by the past performance. And we just went through an unfortunate situation in the city where the settlement that Councilor Leahy referred to had to be paid out of stabilization funds. And that was because, in spite of the fact of this issue being before the city for 3 years and people knowing it was coming, there was no financial planning or offset or funding set aside to prepare for it. The same, unfortunately, is the situation that we're in now, which puts us in the situation of having to go for this discussion of a debt exclusion vote for the entire cost of the project. There have been a number of us on the council for years who've called for fiscal reform, setting money aside for debt funding, et cetera, et cetera. And there's always the promise of future savings, but they have not been realized. They have not been realized. And I understand there's a very vocal group of people in the chambers here, but there's also a lot of people in the community giving feedback. They're not coming in and saying this is going to be a hardship to them because they just don't want to do the schools. They have been very loyal and hardworking homeowners, business owners, making it with their margins shrinking as the sewer rate goes up, the CPA tax comes in, and now this other huge debt issue looms before us. I'm not at all discounting the generosity of the MSBA. I'm not. But on the other hand, we have a high amount of debt in the city right now. But this isn't somebody against somebody else. I'm hearing from people who won't come into this chamber, and they won't say it out loud in the chamber because they don't want to be ostracized. They don't want to be attacked. And so I'm hearing from a lot of people that this is going to make them make very difficult choices between necessities and paying bills. And I've heard the same from businesses who are being squeezed so tight. Because remember, the businesses are also facing a paid leave mandate that is coming into effect, in addition to the sewer rate, the CPA, the increased values of the homes, which is a good thing in one way, but it's also increasing the taxes. And folks have come into this chamber and saying, the community voted 55% for the CPA. Yes, the community did. Almost every elder person I spoke to that voted for the CPA understood they would not have to pay that CPA tax. And so it was a whole different situation with that tax. So to use that as a direct comparison with this situation is not a real comparison. And so I just don't want to see the city pitting business people against homeowners, against people with school children, because I don't think that's what we're about. But on the other hand, we've been talking, I think ever since I got on the council, that we have to be more business friendly. So I think when our long-term investors and huge taxpayers, along with all the homeowners that are paying the taxes, are coming to us and telling us these things, we have to listen to them. And I am listening to them, and I'm hearing from a lot of them. So I think this is not a simple situation, and it's not an easy situation. And I do think there's more than one way to accomplish things. But I do think we should all have respect and regard for the true intentions of people coming before us. Thank you.
Any other counselors? Okay, I'm going to take the privilege of, if I may, and I know you got to leave, so
Go ahead.
you do not have to stay and hear my comments, but if you wish to stay.
How long are you going to be? I got a Bruins game to watch. No.
Well, we just got cable back here. So, and I was gonna fly you there, by the way, but now you're out. So I'm gonna say a few things, and it's gonna take me a few minutes to say them.
Sorry.
So just with all due respect.
You listen to me so I can listen to you.
There you go. So, I mean, I've been on a long time away from council. Wasn't even called council when I first got on here. And this has been a very difficult issue for me. And I will say, from both sides, I've had a lot of people I know that disagree with my opinion on both sides. And for the most part, I appreciate the respect that you gave me for at least trying to think through the process. And that's what I tried to do, and I'm still trying to do it. A couple of, in looking back, and obviously I wasn't involved in the early part of this process, I truly wish that we had considered the financial impact earlier in the process so that we weren't looking at a debt exclusion to start coming out in November of this past year. That we started our process in 2015 and 16 and looking at the options that we have. I also wish that, knowing that this was an option that the city was looking to consider, that we would, the administration, would have begun to start holding back on some monies and starting putting monies away so that we would be in a position to do more of this from a regular tax base rather than from a debt exclusion. I am encouraging the mayor in this case, and I appreciate Councilor Lisi's comments about potential, and I would encourage the mayor to meet with his financial advisors to come to some conclusion as to what estimate of new revenues that we might have coming in that might be able to offset using this debt exclusion, and to actually commit to a regular city budget, that we would commit as much as possible through that rather than making it a total debt exclusion. And again, my original, when I first looked at things, my hope was that it would cut the debt exclusion in half, which would be a pretty significant drop, and would certainly be. So that's one thing I want to encourage. I've had more calls from state officials in the last couple of weeks than I've had in my life. And I will say, as Mr. McCarthy will note, as I told him yesterday, I'm disappointed in your comments, but I respect your comments, and I think he understood where I came from. And I have tried to do what I thought was best in trying to unite the city. And I still have concerns. I hear those concerns coming out in comments tonight. And I really wish that we were in a situation where we could have less potential negative impact on the economic side and still get the maximum educational benefit on the other side. And I'm not sure that's the case. And I am very concerned that as we go through this process, and I know let me also make this point, based on what your comments are, and I think I'm correct, but if I'm incorrect, you feel free to interrupt. I know people were pushing me when I first got on there, and let me also say, with all due respect to my fellow councilors, when President McGee asked for volunteers, I didn't see any other hands going up. And the old guy with the gray hair was the only one that put his hand up, so I'm never raising my hand again. So, I would take an oath, but that's about it. I do have that concern, and I really encourage, and if we had done, and I was encouraged to put this out on the ballot in April, now, based on what's gone on, I'm assuming, based on if we had done it in April and we did not have the Humison Amendment at that point, and we didn't have any other, that we would have gotten the original figure and not the potential of these additional savings that we might make. Is that correct?
It depends. I can't remember how the amendment, they could have worded an amendment so that you could have.
But potentially. Right now, as it is right now, if we had done it and you were rewarding it and this is what we were given, my gut is that unless the specific amendment allowed it, that you would be in that situation. So, again, I want to encourage the mayor to meet soon and put all of his financial advisors together and see what percentage of this, what dollar amount of this $56 million could be as part of our regular tax in the next couple of years. The other point I want to make goes to the school savings, because I did speak to the Commissioner of Education's office. You were only tag teaming me yesterday. They triple teamed me the day before. And, you know, I brought up the $800,000 to $1 million, which the Drs. Reich and Anthony have indicated that could be provided. I asked, can we get that? How do we get that to be a firm commitment throughout the process? And I would certainly encourage the law department and any other advisors that we have to try to see if we can put that into the process. Obviously, if we got $1 million out of 3 point, and if we got the extra points, it would be probably 3.4 million. We're down to 2.4 million. If the mayor can take some of that money out of the budget, maybe we're down to 1.5 or 2 million. I'm trying to reduce the debt exclusion and the additional tax. I think everyone's concerns I've heard. I will also say that I have visited, and Whitney, if you're in there, you correct me, but I think I've visited 8 or 9 schools. I've walked the schools. I've tried to put myself in the position of students. I've watched the position of faculty, and I know you're all committed, but this is to the general public. We need, and I know most of you are parents, not all of you, but most of you. We need parents to be involved. The classes that I went to, and I was at Metcalf School today. Yeah, that's what they were saying there too. But at Metcalf School today, where clearly parents have taken an interest in getting their children into a special program, and they've encouraged their children to make sure they take full advantage of that program. We need that kind of thing and that kind of input. So your neighbors, your friends that are not that involved, and there's got to be a lot of families that are not that involved. I want to encourage you in being active to try to promote this, to also be active and try to promote the parental involvement, because we can build a great new school. We can provide all the greatest facilities in the world. But if we don't get parents to be involved in being part of the solution and recognizing that their children, their children attending school on an everyday basis and recognizing that importance, all the other things we're doing don't matter. With all due respect, they don't matter. When we have a 22% absentee rate, they don't matter. We have got to work as a community. And I can tell you, I've met with the biggest businesses, the smallest businesses, and quite a few in between. I've met with, and I will also correct a comment, and I won't mention the name, but he's been very respectful, and we've had probably, I don't know, maybe about 10 or 15 long email conversations, because I'm old, I don't do texting. I know someone texted me yesterday, and I don't do good with texting, so. And I was told that, you know, there are not that many elderly that own homes. And as an elderly person that owns a home, I went and decided to look at the voters list and see how many elderly actually do own homes. And there are a lot of elderly that own their own homes. So just keep that in mind and show that. And there is an impact. And again, I wish we were sitting here and we weren't having to have a conversation that went back to the voters without being in agreement. I would much rather be here with the situation where we could have bonded this in the city, and I don't think there's a councilor that would vote against it had we been in that position. And we need to find a way for future reference, and hopefully partly here, to get to that situation where we start to think long-term and not today. I mean, we get bond proposals coming in, with all due respect now. I mean, I'm taking a whole different look at bond proposals coming in from any kind of bond. I mean, we need to get a plan. And I will say that Councilor Bacon and I have filed an order coming up at the next meeting to try to do that. But we need to do something different than what we're doing here. With all of that said, I'm almost done.
No, I thought you were done. I just have a procedural question. When you're done.
I can be long-winded.
Oh, yeah.
But, whoa. So, I mean, and believe me, this is not a decision, and I'm still not ready to make a decision, but I'm going to defer in terms of letting the council have their say. But, again, for future reference, as we plan, whatever we're planning, let's know what the financial implications are before we say that's where we want to go. Know where we're getting the resources for that particular project, whatever it is, before we make that commitment, and let's balance our overall needs. So again, and one last point, and then I'm done. People have said, that you can't do one school, and you're not being fair to. With all due respect to that comment about, I got to be equitable in schools. If that's true, then we should be building 9 new schools. Because if you're telling me that the kids at Morgan School, and the kids at Kelly School, and the kids at Lawrence School, and the kids at McMahon School, and the kids at Sullivan School, and the kids at Donahue School, and the kids at White School are getting the exact same education in the same environment, you're not dealing with reality. So we want to make sure their educational tools are there, and whatever gets decided, I will certainly support one way or the other, but I hope the community comes together, and I hope that we have no negative impact in this operation. Todd? Councilman McGee, sorry.
I know you're trying to get to the game. One question. June 6th is our deadline, so June 4th really for us for the meeting. We take up the ballot question. If approved, June 4th, which then allows them to go, what about the bond? I know we talked about it, but I kind of missed that. Do we have to take up the bond as well with the ballot question June 4th? No or yes? Or?
I don't think so, but I would defer to your bond counsel, that question.
Well, no, I just want to make sure for your process.
Oh, for my
I'm
my
not worried
process,
about
no.
bond counsel.
No, for our process, no.
So you'd be in time.
See, I'm a lawyer, so I'm hesitant to answer legal questions,
Yeah, same here. Yeah, that's the problem. All right, I just want to make sure on that because I don't want to get to June 4th and then we're scrambling to get something out of finance. So we're okay there. Okay, thank you. That's one clarification.
So I do want to, first of all, thank you for your time. Thank you for coming. I think everybody showed you respect.
Well, that's where I was going to ask for a point of personal privilege to just make that point. I appreciated the questions that were asked. I appreciated the tone of the questions that were asked. And as I sit here, I think everyone's trying to do what they believe is best for the city of Holyoke. One crazy idea came to me while I was sitting here. I was remembering, and I can't remember which public official said this, but I was out at I think it was a groundbreaking out in Western Mass somewhere, and it was either the rep or the senator was making the point of, over the past 10 years, we've helped Wellesley build a school, we've helped Norwood build a school, we've helped Weston build a school, we've helped Wayland build a school. Isn't it time for all those communities to help us build a school? And so I just leave you with that thought, and I hope that didn't upset anybody. But thanks. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So if we go back to it, Chair,
Go ahead.
as we now know, item 3 we cannot do. So I'd make a motion for item 3 to be denied or given leave to withdraw, however you want to do it.
I'll second leave to withdraw.
Okay. Item 3 has been recommended for leave to withdraw. Motion has been approved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No.
Item 1 referred to the ballot question for April 30th, 2019. Item 2 refers to September 24th. They're both similar, one's just with different dates. So item 1 can be given leave to withdraw? Because it's this, item 2 is just with a different date. And you can always debate the date later, but just getting them off the roll
And it
is my
is
procedure.
different language too. Is the correct language.
Well, item 2 is the correct language,
Yeah.
so that's why I was trying to get rid of 1.
So, again, the
So
motion-
item 1 is leave to withdraw.
Second. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Item 2,
I make a motion to deny.
and with all due respect, I respect Councilor Bacon, and I know she's worked diligently to try to figure out, just as I have, trying to figure out how to do something that we can, improve the education and still make sure we maintain our business environment, our tax base. But in light of all the comments that I've heard, I won't second that. One other point just before we make, and this is, again, in line with, planning ahead, and that is this, and I've had a lot of people tell me, we're gonna bring a lot of people back, they're gonna start coming back to our schools, so just be aware of this statistic. Number one, if this goes through and if it's passed, the very first, and if all the kids that are in second, third, and fourth grade attending Holyoke Public Schools continue in Holyoke Public Schools, we have more students than we are expecting to have. So we are already, you would be approximately 126 students over what they're projecting. So keep that in mind to start with. I know they can accept additional ones, but if in fact we do bring additional students in, you need to consider that and how we're going to handle that ahead of time, not when it becomes the fact, if it in fact does become a fact. So that's just a point, and
All right, so my motion would be to approve and send out to the full council. Now, yeah, so my motion is for item 2 to approve to send out to the full council for a vote.
as September 24th.
That can always be debated on the floor. I mean, right now, that's what is on the language, but that can always be amended if needed, or amended here. That's always the rule.
Yeah, I certainly would, again, and I'm still working my way through, but I certainly would not vote for September 24th. But, and I'm going to throw another option out at you because I'm still trying to work, and I'm still going to be asking questions over the next 4 or 5 days and try to come up to a better community solution if it is possible. But I would entertain a motion that we refer it back, question 2, back to the full council without a recommendation.
Yeah, as well. You could do that.
So I'll entertain.
Mr. Chairman, can
Yep,
I ask one question?
yep.
As the maker of the order in the language, I would ask the committee to amend it to November, so we can start there next Tuesday.
So the maker of the order has asked that we amend September 24th to now read November 4th, I do believe,
5th, I thought.
2019, from the maker of
Isn't
the
it
order.
5th?
I thought it was the 5th. So.
Is it, oh, that's asking.
All right, who knows when the November election
I'll
is?
pull it up on my calendar.
Okay,
So November 5th.
so there's a motion to change the date on question 2 to November 5th, 2019, and remove September 24th. Is that seconded?
Second.
Second? All in favor of that amendment?
Aye.
Okay,
I'm gonna say no. But that's fine. It's still 2-1.
okay. And then I'll entertain a motion that we send
So the
question 2 to
motion-
the city council without a recommendation.
Motion is to refer to the full board without a recommendation with the amendment that was approved.
Correct. So,
So that was seconded? Just one
I'll
You're
second.
point?
making the motion?
no, he did.
He's making the motion?
Yeah,
You made it, right?
yeah, under
Motion
discussion.
is made. I'll second that motion.
So, for those in the public, What is before us is a order from Counselor McGiverin for, and it is the correct language, that's why item 1 was given leave to withdraw. This is the correct ballot language that was given by legal as well as approved by the state, or what was recommended by the state. On it was September 24th, 2019. That has been amended to be November 5th, 2019. As we all know, there are pros and cons to that. It gives more time for us to keep going after the state to get more funds in order to, in essence, attack the $56 million liability. As I've always said from day one, and I do thank Counselor Murphy for taking on this role. I'm sure he'll hit me outside later. It has been tough. It is a tough question. It's a tough issue because it's an emotional issue. For me, I've got kids in the game, so I've stated that clearly, and I don't have any conflicts, but I always make it known. This issue, has been said by me from the very beginning, is too big for a 3-member board or a 13-member board. It goes to the public, in my view. I just ask the public to work together with us to attack the number. That's the fight. We know we need the schools. We know we do. I mean, look at the report. I mean, the Leubold family, former city councilor Leubold, when he came in and talked about it, look at that report. The gentleman mentioned it because they helped fund the report, and the feasibility shows that our schools are in tough shape, for lack of a better word. We need the schools, but we need a community to help offset that cost and actually ask the state for the correct reimbursement. We know it's going to be a battle, but it's a battle we should take together, not against each other. So my vote is to allow the community to vote on the question, but at the same time, I'm asking you to help us to get funds from the state. They might tell us, that's it. At least we tried. We now know, with the school department's help, with potentially Senator Hummison's help, and soon to be Representative Vega, there's possibilities for other overrides to help us with that cost. But to the community as a whole, let's work together and not against each other. That's the goal on this one. So to me, I would like the public to vote on this and tell us what is right. I understand the cost, but I unfortunately know the history of the schools because I used to be a teacher. We need these buildings. That's my view.
So one quick information source. So the recommendation is we're sending the ballot question to the full council without a recommendation. It will require a 9-vote, 2/3 majority of the council to put this on the ballot. It would also require the bond language, $131 million, to also have 9 votes to go on the ballot. So just so you're aware, right now that's what we're bringing it out to the council, and just want to let you know that. So.
Excuse me.
Sir.
You removed me.
Sir.
I have been here for 9 years. You have never brought in any construction project in the last 9 years on budget.
Okay, sir, please.
We'll deal with real numbers before you give them to the voters. Remember, Lisi.
Sir, please, sir.
Order.
Sir, with all due respect, sir, right now you are not recognized. You are also not doing this with any kind of respect, and with all due respect to you.
We're not doing any of us
Well,
good when you lie to us by giving
first,
us fictitious numbers.
first of all, sir, I am not lying to you, so don't go pointing a finger at me, and I'll point one back at you. You were pointing. So, all right, you're done.
Counselor Lisi
So.
has a question.
Councilor Lisi.
So I just want to be clear that on Tuesday, June 4th, we need to approve the ballot language. The ballot language is a prescribed boilerplate structured sentence that talks about the building square footage and that we will go to use debt exclusion to fund the schools. There's no number in the ballot vote. We have ostensibly 3 months before we have to figure out the bond language. Part of that equation is going to be the numbers that the project manager and the architect come back to us with now that we have a date, whatever date we set, whether it's September or November, that's going to affect the project costs. So the ballot language and the bond language are distinct, and they can move forward at different rates. And once we set the ballot language and the date for the ballot referendum, then we're able to present concrete numbers to the community. We're not lying. We're using the best projections that we have at hand. Nothing becomes concrete until we set a date for the ballot referendum. Thank you.
So the
Okay, on the
motion was to refer to the committee as amended without a recommendation.
To the council.
Yeah, council.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No,
Okay, 2-1 to refer to the city council. Entertain a motion that we adjourn?
without a recommendation.
Without a recommendation, correct.
So it'll be taken up June 4th, at the June 4th meeting.
And entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion is to adjourn?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.